Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Rand Paul, U.S. Senator.
Thank you. I wondered how many conservatives there were in Chicago. I hope this isn't all of them. It's good to be here in Illinois. I understand the Wisconsin Democrats have a great little hideaway nearby. Do you think they'll be running to Illinois this year? Isn't it ironic that Wisconsin Democrats are trying to get out of Wisconsin and Illinois businesses are trying to get into Wisconsin? Mr. President, did you hear Scott Walker won in a landslide? Now, it's hard for me to say that without gloating. I'm going to try again. Mr. President, did you hear that he won big in a blue state? You know, I wonder if it worries anybody over at Team Obama. I think it might. Scott Walker's victory should send a message to all politicians, especially some of those weak-kneed politicians in Washington, that you can stand on principle and get reelected. Voters will reward, if given the chance, voters will reward reformers who stand up on principle. Now, the media, they whine and complain all day long on Capitol Hill. Why won't you guys just compromise? Why won't y'all just hold hands and sing Kumbaya and all the nation's problems will simply melt away? So today I have good news for the media elites. We've reached a tentative agreement in Washington. We've agreed, Democrats and Republicans, at least in principle, to no longer send out government checks to dead people. Now, I say in principle because even this landmark agreement, if it's finalized, we still can't be certain that anyone in Washington has enough of a clue to actually stop sending out checks to dead people. Now, you're probably asking yourself, how big a problem can this be? Surely government can't really be that stupid. Well, in the last 5 years, we've mailed out over $600 million in pension checks to dead people. One guy collected his father's check from 1971 to 2008. You know how they caught him? He died. It's not that government officials are inherently stupid, although it's a debatable point. It's that government doesn't get the same signals that you and I get. Government doesn't have to make a profit. They don't seem to notice or care when money is spent, wasted, or simply thrown down a rat hole. People will always spend other people's money less wisely than their own. That's why government is best that governs least. Now, if Democrats and Republicans want this to stop, if elected officials want to quit sending checks to dead people, government would have to incorporate market signals. We can't solve every problem, but we can solve some things. I've proposed that civil servants be paid and given bonuses based on how much money they save. Today, it's the opposite. No self-respecting bureaucrat wants to be caught not spending all of his or her budget. If you don't spend all of it, you won't get it next year. So the signal we send to bureaucrats is the opposite of the marketplace. We tell them to spend it all. Try to never have any taxpayer money left. Now, I've tried to set a good example in my office. My office returned over $500,000 back to the Treasury. Now, when you have $1 trillion deficit, that may not sound like much, but if every office and every agency in government turned back in that same percentage, we'd cut the deficit by more than half, just like that. The country needs leaders who will take these bold steps, who will show that you can cut government spending and be reelected. That's not what we have right now. The President of the United States has utterly failed to lead us. He has failed to cut anything. In fact, he has presided over the largest spending and debt increases in our history. 4 years ago, the president promised us hope and change. Instead, all we hear is class warfare and the politics of envy. The president promised us economic growth. Instead, we have 12 million people unemployed, rising gas prices, and economic stagnation. The president promised to rise above partisanship. Instead, he daily inveighs against the successful, maligns the job creators, and attacks the very essence of the American dream. He ignores the lessons of history. Instead of creating an expanding economic pie for all, he seeks to divide up and redistribute a shrinking pie. He strangles small business and energy producers with the worst regulations, costing millions of jobs and billions in higher energy prices. But don't worry, his rich friends and his campaign contributors are doing okay. They're receiving billions of your dollars in taxpayer-funded loans for their solar panel companies. As we spiral headlong in towards a debt crisis, the great speechmaker-in-chief has no plan to reform entitlements. He refuses to even present a plan. Instead, President Obama is taking the last year and a half of his presidency to campaign. His strategy, to win at all costs. We are told, like he told Putin, to talk to him after the election when he will be less restrained. Less restrained? My goodness, you mean Obamacare, tax increases, and trillion-dollar deficits was restraint? I shudder to even think about a less restrained President Obama. While I do believe we should stand on our principles, I'm not for saying we won't do anything with you. I'm for working with the other side. In fact, I sat down with President Obama and presented a plan to save Social Security. Gradually raise the age, means test the benefits, fixes it for 75 years. When I presented the plan to him, I told him, frankly, if he worked with us, he could probably be reelected. I'm serious. He could have gone down in history as the president who reached across the aisle, saved Social Security for generations. What was his response? Nothing. Zero. No plan to reform the entitlements. In fact, he has resolutely ignored all of the recommendations from the Simpson-Bowles committee that he appointed. Instead, the Democrats' plan on entitlements seems to be to televise pictures of Republicans pushing grandma off the cliff in a wheelchair. This is not leadership. This is not governing. This is completely and utterly irresponsible. And it should cause the American people to stand up and say, Mr. President, you're fired. They all want to know about compromise. You're going to hear from a new rising star, Richard Murdoch, in a few minutes. And they give him a hard time about, will he compromise? Well, here's what I say. Will you compromise on the budget? On the numbers? Sure, I'll talk to him. But the president's budget received 0 votes 2 years in a row in Congress. But at least that's better than the Senate Democrats. They don't even bother. They refuse to even produce a budget. It doesn't even matter to them that the law requires Congress to pass a budget. Republicans, on the other hand, we had several budgets. My office produced a budget that balances in 5 years. My office produced a budget with across-the-board spending cuts, reforms and saves Social Security and Medicare, and simplifies the tax code to a 17% flat tax. The Democrats offered nothing, 0, no budget. How do you negotiate? How do you compromise with someone who doesn't show up? How do you compromise between a plan that balances in 5 years and, well, no plan at all? Personally, I think the Senate Democrats should turn back their salaries in to the Treasury. I need to make a note to tell Harry Reid about that when we get back. Many of these Senate Democrats are going to be up for election. So will the president. It's our job to show a clear contrast. That's why we're here as conservatives. We need to remember, as Reagan said, to paint in bold colors, not pale pastels. This election, like no other, will be about the American dream. Voters will be asked, do you believe that the American dream still exists? Do you believe that your children can achieve the American dream? That your children may achieve even more success than you have? Or have you given up on what made America great? Do you want a president that goes to your neighbor's house and takes one of their cars and gives it to you? Is that what we've become? Do you want a president who redistributes wealth to make a fair society? Or do you want a president who preserves the laws and traditions that have made America great, that have made America the greatest, richest, and most humanitarian nation in history? What makes America great is the mobility of people, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. What makes America great is that among us, any among us, might become the next Bill Gates, the next Mark Zuckerberg. The American dream proves that hard work and education do pay off. We may not all become billionaires or even millionaires, but success is out there and available to any American who chooses to strive. In this election, we will choose between a government-enforced egalitarianism or a freedom-driven meritocracy. If we choose government to enforce fairness, we must remember the adage that a government that is big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take everything you have. Many republics have failed after a few centuries. Will America falter? Will America enter into a slow decay? Or will we rediscover our moorings, our foundation? Will we rise to the occasion and strive and believe in the concept of liberty, the pursuit of happiness that has brought us more prosperity than any civilization ever? I, for one, will not give up the fight. I believe in the greatness of our founding documents, in the greatness of our founding ideals. I, will, for one, will not trade 1 ounce of liberty for security. And when they come to retrieve from me my freedom and the fruits of my labor, I will reply that no man and no government can take my freedom. My freedom predates government. My freedom comes from my Creator and pre-exists before all schemes that attempt to confine and restrict it. Jefferson warned that each generation must renew the battle for liberty. This election finds us at a crossroads. The wagon is overloaded and there are less and less left to pull the wagon. I hope you will join me in pledging to fight, pledging to continue the fight. In that cause, I will fight to preserve something more valuable than gold, something more precious than any gem, liberty, in whose cause I will fight to the end. Thank you, and God bless America. Thank you. Thank you.